welcome. My name is Tim Lang. Those who don't know me, I'm Professor of Food Policy here at City University, but I welcome you very genuinely to this 6th City Food Symposium that's kind of becoming a little tradition, which is funded and supported by the Worshipful Company of Cooks, who are an old city livery company, and we've got masters and past masters and many Illuminati from the cooks here, so we thank you very genuinely. It's a great occasion. And I also thank you and welcome you from the Food Research Collaboration, which is an inter-university collaboration between disciplines of academia with civil society. After the last symposium, which was on what I thought and still think is a very thorny issue of sustainable diets, the master of the cooks, in a feedback where I said how I thought it had gone, said, can you not be a bit edgier, a bit more radicalism? Okay, now this is from the cooks, a very august, not boring, but, you know, very sort of respectable organisation. So I don't think we could have done something edgier than this today. I have organised conferences since I was 20, and I have never had more difficulty in arranging one than today. My lips are sealed who wouldn't come and speak. You will notice some sectors absent. I wanted to have a fair representation, which is what we try to do on these occasions, to explore issues. Here we have one of the most important political, with a capital P, issues facing Britain, and in a little way, actually a significant way, the European Union. The major change on, one of the major changes on the world political map for the last 200 years, and there is silence on the issue of food, with very honourable exceptions, one of whom illustriously is standing at the front here, we'll hear from in a moment. Very little discussion of this issue. And we thought that this was an issue that is actually in advance of its time. In other words, next year this will be very big. There could not be a better issue for us to discuss than this. The food implications of Britain and Europe, or Britain voting to leave Europe. This is about political geography with capital P attached before it. To remind you, the purpose, anyone who's signed on to the web or anything, but in case someone hasn't, this is the purpose of today. I'm not going to read these out, but it's basically to discuss the food implications of Brexit, to consider, this is what we do at the Centre for Food Policy here at City, with many, many universities and organisations around the country, indeed around the world. We're interested in the public interest. What is pro bono publico? I use the Latin term. We have Italians here. This is the ancient Roman principle of trying to work out what good policy is in relation to the public interest. And frankly, we could and should spend a week discussing it. We can't. I've crammed it in, and we've crammed it in as usual, but it's a taster, and I hope by the end of the day we'll have got a very good outline of some of the key issues that we're to address. Over the weekend, thinking in advance, look at this, I was trying to think, where are we? We're at the bottom right hand here. If you can see it, Alan, you can look at it over there, you can see it. Britain voted to stay in the European Union in 1975, having been taken in by Edward Heath, a Conservative government. It voted to stay in under a Labour government, although Harold Wilson was ambivalent, those of us who remember it at the time. But on the left, I put some sort of significant events in the restructuring of the world's food system. there are some acronyms, Millennium Development Goals, ICN2, International Conference on Nutrition, the SDGs. This year we have signed, the world has signed the Sustainable Development Goals. Out of 17 development goals, there are 169 targets. From those, 70 of them are food. We cannot address the issues raised in the Paris climate change talks agreed on Saturday unless food is there. And anyone who follows me on Twitter or any of these areas, I am actually partly in despair at the way in which the whole of the Paris and the climate change talks shrouded and bracketed around the issue of energy, when you cannot address climate change unless you address the issue of food. And food is silent at this big level, but also at this issue of Britain and Europe, when in fact it seems to me obvious, and I think all of our speakers today agree this is critical. For those, again, who don't know about Britain, here is the complex world of the British food supply chain. This is DEFRA's most recent summary of it. We've got 64 million consumers at the top. We've got farmers at the middle at the bottom. There are about just under 500,000 of them. Their value added is about 10 billion out of the 200 billion that the British spend on food. Farming gets very little money. Money is made, value is added throughout the chain as it goes up. I have ringed for you on the right the imports. Britain imports vast amounts of food. It's low in financial value but huge in actual quantity. There is a massive trade gap. If you didn't know that, it is time you did. On the top, I've put it. This is all from the DEFRA Food Statistics. We basically import about £40 billion worth of food and export about £19 billion. There's a £21 billion trade gap in food. And when you look in the middle, on the right here, you see in different products, the trade gap is bigger than others. As a public health man, I'm a social scientist, but I am bothered about public health. I look at public health, and actually fruit and vegetables is a catastrophe. A catastrophe, let me just tell you. And a catastrophe because it's importing embedded water. We have my friend and hero, Tony Allen, Mr. Walter here in the audience from SOAS and King's. And where does it come from? I've put it at the bottom here. Nearly a third of our food comes from the European Union, and we're not talking about it. It is staggering. This is a political failure, and I would like you to know I tried very hard to get leading politicians to come to speak today, including the Secretary of State. Okay, and they're not here. That they have the right to. There's no at all accusation from me there. But the reason is, I think, and we must talk about this, is because everyone's heads are down below the parapet. Now, how is the issue going to be framed in next year's debates? That, it seems to me, is our task today. How is this going to be framed? So, sitting in my lovely study at home, preparing for illustrious people like Alan and our first panel of speakers, now I was thinking, what do I think? Well, I think this issue is these 5 issues. There's a practical issue of how can we inject food into a debate which is all about migrants or bent bananas or some leftover of British, reading age 8 media analysis. It's about public attitudes. We've got people from the Henley Centre, as was WPP, the biggest marketing and advertising company. Andrew Curry is coming later to summarise public attitudes on that. We have got these confounding issues of, the mythology of Britain being swamped. Actually, if it wasn't for migrant labour, there wouldn't be any British horticulture, because my home county of Lincolnshire, that is the people who pick the vegetables, because the British won't do it. So there are some very serious political issues here. Practical matters, Alan, I think, will talk about this. Options, timing, legal issues. I think, to be self-critical, I've not got a lawyer here. Actually, I tried pretty hard to get lawyers. But for genuine reasons, they weren't there. But we need to flag that. There are some very serious legal issues. There was a bevy of Allans of agricultural economics, and another Alan Matthews of Trinity College Dublin, in a very elegant paper I can send to people if you want, summarise some of these things. There's some really serious legal issues. If we did vote next year to leave the European Union, the practicalities of unravelling the law are immense, absolutely immense. And it's about politics, you know. There are big issues. I was born in 1948 in the post-Second World War reconstruction. The European Union comes out of that. It's been part of a peacemaking. You know, there hasn't been many wars inside Europe. There's been wars outside Europe. We lose sight of that, I think, at our peril. And there are many people on the sort of the green and sustainability agenda, thinking of the Paris talks. There is a perfectly reasonable position to discuss, is this all a complete deviation from the task, which is about reducing carbon, reducing the obesity crisis, addressing the externalities of price. So these are big issues. I think more than any time in my 45 years, I don't know about you, Alan, my 45 years of working in food policy, I cannot think of a bigger moment that we're facing than this. So past masters of the cooks who said, can you get a bit more edge into it? Well, I think we've got it today. And I always like to start by saying thank you to our speakers and to you and to the team at the City who's helped pull this together. We thought we're going to end with doing a poll. So we thought we'd start with a poll.
That's the first question. If you had a vote now, would you vote for the UK to leave or stay in the EU? Press A to leave, B to stay, which seems to be by far the most popular, or C, don't know. The second question is now open, I hope. And the second question is, do you think the British public will vote to stay in or leave the EU?
Yes, no, this will be an interesting
This is
answer. The interesting one.
So this one's done now. So most of you, 46% think that the British public will vote to stay in, but 30% leave.
24% think it's undecided.
But quite a lot of, don't know. So I'll go on to the next question. How important is food as a consideration for staying or leaving in the EU? The EU. So that's it.
Okay, very good. Well, we've got a little bit of a benchmark. The general sentiment pro-Europe within the room, but when it comes to judging outside the room, probably pretty fair reflection. In other words, the country's split and undecided.